Hey everyone, how you going? Hope you're doing well. Today I'm making some dinner rolls. This is pretty simple Ellie style dinner rolls. I managed to get a hold of this lovely Rosella wheat, which is a soft white wheat variety from Woodstock Flours. My friend Marie from Simply Sourdough in Victoria, she gave me this to bring home from my recent Victoria trip. It's a lovely soft white wheat that would normally be used for cakes and biscuits and things, but I decided to mix it with some of my hard white wheat today to make dinner rolls. Soft wheats are surprisingly good for bread and rolls and things like that, so don't be afraid to give them a try if you can get them. So I'm using 500 grams of flour in total, so I've got 250 grams each of the soft wheat grain, the Rosella wheat, and also the hard white wheat that I've got, which is the Scout variety from Burrum Biodynamics in Victoria. And I just mill those two together. But if you don't have soft wheat flour and hard wheat flour, just use any whole wheat flour you can get your hands on. It really won't make too much difference, but you can play around with flour types if you want to. You can use a combination of something like a hard wheat, you could use spelt, you could use, some of the other ancient grain flours and things like that. Just play around with it. These are really forgiving. So while my flour is milling, I just weighed out my salt and I mix that through into the flour just to save a bit of time. It's how I often do it if I'm not reserving the salt for an autolyse. But we're not doing any of that with this, we're just mixing it all together. To that I do add a bit of fat, you can use butter. In this case I'm using some non-dairy spread, but some olive oil would be good too, and also some sugar. So it's about a tablespoon of brown sugar is what I add. So a tablespoon of the butter or the non-dairy spread or olive oil, and a tablespoon of sugar is great, and just kind of mix the sugar through. And I just melt my Nuttelex in the microwave. Adding these other ingredients just enriches this dough a little bit more and makes these a little bit more kind of yummy for a special occasion. For the liquid portion, I use 200 grams of yogurt and 150 grams of water. But you don't have to add any of these special ingredients if you want. You can just make this a lean dough with flour, salt and water if you want, but I like to use my yogurt. It's a little bit unusual. It is my homemade soy yogurt. You can use any kind of yogurt you want. You can use milk, you could use buttermilk. That would all be really nice. And like I said, those ingredients, they just enrich this dough a little bit. There's my sourdough starter that I added in. That's just old starter out of the fridge. This is my simple Ellie version, as I said. I don't tend to fuss too much over my sourdough bread recipes, so I'm keeping this really simple and easy to make. So I've just sort of dissolved the sourdough starter a little bit there in the yogurt and water combination. Then I add my fat into that and I mix the whole lot together. Don't forget the salt has already been added to the flour and that has been mixed in as well. So all of the ingredients are in there now. It's really just a dump it all in and mix it up kind of a situation. This is a bit more of a drier dough than a lot of my bread recipes are, so I find it a bit easier to tip it out of the bowl and just give it a little quick kneading by hand to pull it all together. You can use a mixer if you want. You can just put this into a stand mixer or whatever kind of mixer you have for probably about 5 minutes if you've got a KitchenAid. Some more gentle mixers, you can mix them a bit longer. But when you're hand mixing this, if you want to hand knead it, you can just knead it right from the beginning if you want. Or you can do what I do, and this is my little trick, because I really don't like handling sticky dough, and you can see how sticky that is at the beginning. All I do is knead it for a minute or two just to bring it together, and then I cover it up and set it aside for an hour while I do other things. For example, I feed my sourdough starter and get that fed up and get that activating, and later on I'll put that back in the fridge for my next bake. Once you've got those things done, just set your timer and let that dough sit for an hour. And then when you come back to it after an hour's rest, it is much, much smoother. So the bran and the germ and all of the goodies in that whole grain flour have had time to absorb the water. The dough is much more smoother, and then you can do much more of an easier kneading. It's much easier to knead a smooth, pliable, a lot less sticky dough than it is to knead a really fresh one. So you could try letting it sit for half an hour or an hour. I wouldn't leave it too much longer because you want to do the kneading at the beginning with this, and then you can just leave it to ferment without having to do anything else to it. So I did skip through a lot of that, but I kneaded this for probably just a few minutes, and you can see it's still sticky, but it's more developed than it was. And for making some little dinner rolls, that's all I do. You might get a better result if you knead it longer, or if you use a mixer, you might get a higher rise and a slightly more kind of fluffy little roll. But I find if I make these fresh and eat them fresh, they're just beautiful, even with minimal mixing. So it was quite a cool day, and the cool day actually really threw me off. I wasn't expecting it to be this cool in November here in Brisbane. Normally it's quite hot by now. These are the pans I used. I ended up going with that metal pan, but you want a reasonably small pan. So this dough may have been better if I had fermented it a little bit more, but it did have some bubbles in it. If you look closely, you could see the small bubbles, and it was fermented enough for me to proceed to the next stage. But obviously in warmer weather, it will be a lot faster. You might have this ready in 4 hours rather than 6 hours for me, and I even had it kept in a warm spot as well. So once you've got your dough fermented and it's sort of showing some signs of activation and it's rising, then all you need to do is get it shaped into some little roll shapes, and then you prove it again, and then you bake it. So to shape this dough, what I do is I weigh the whole dough. You didn't see me doing that, but I did. I took the whole weight, and then I divide that by however many rolls I want. I find this small recipe is nice for 10 or 12 small rolls. I made 12 small rolls this time. I like my dinner rolls pretty small because I don't want to completely fill myself up on bread. I want to be able to have enough room for other things on my plate. So it's just nice to have a little roll to mop up the gravy, or, just enjoy along with a meal, especially around Christmas time. This is a nice little recipe. So yeah, just divide your dough into equal portions. You don't have to weigh them out like I am, but if you want to have them all looking perfectly even and looking the same, then it is best to weigh them. But you can just roll this dough out to be like a big sausage and then cut it up into 12 bits. That's totally fine too. It will be your dough and your rolls, so make it however you want to. This is just how I did them on this particular day. Also for the video, I like to have my rolls all looking even, so I do go to a bit more extra effort when I'm making my videos. The weather was so dry this day, I made sure I kept everything covered up. I was really afraid of these little things drying out. And this is how I shaped them. So basically this bit of slow-mo, basically just letting the dough stick to the table and loosely with your hand cupped over it. You do that circular motion, and your hand just loosely, very, very loosely, you don't want to grab onto the dough, but really, really loosely go around in circles, and the dough grabs to the bench and your hand sort of forms it into that round shape as you go. Try it out. It takes a little bit of practice, but once you get the hang of it, you'll see how good it is. If the dough starts sticking to your hand, which it will do, just get a little bit of water on them, or even a little bit of flour. But you don't want any water or flour on the bench. You want the bench to be sticky so that the dough sticks to the bench, but not to your hand. I've got a demo of all of this in my hot cross buns video as well, which if you're into these kind of little festive treats, then you might want to check out that video too. But bear in mind that my recipes are all really basic. I'm not really much of a fancy baker, so they're just a bit of a guide, but you can jazz these up even more if you want by adding seeds or, other ingredients. So once they're in your tray, just pop them down. If you've got a bigger tray and you don't want them touching each other, you can spread them out a bit more. But for the final proof, make sure you cover them up, because if you've got dry weather like I did that day, it was incredibly low humidity, really, really unusual for our climate, which is normally humid. It was so dry, so I had to cover them up. And it took about 2.5 hours for them to puff up enough for me to bake them. In really hot weather, and I did warm it up, you can see there I had a jug of hot water in my cooler. In really hot weather, they might only take half an hour, so you really have to watch the dough and not the clock. And preheat your oven when you think they're nearly ready, and you can either bake them for 20 minutes at about 220 Celsius or 30 minutes at a bit lower at about 180. It's up to you. I did the quick version because it was getting later in the evening. That really cool day absolutely threw me. I didn't realize how slow it was all going to be, so I baked them quite fast in the hotter oven, and they came out really good. I did get those little burny, no, they're not burnt, but there's little darker brown spots on there. I'm not quite sure what that's all about. I've never had that before. Could be that I normally bake them a little bit longer till they're darker. You can bake these quite dark brown if you want, or lighter. It might be the sugar. I'm not exactly sure. But see if that happens with yours. After they're baked, I did put some more melted non-dairy spread on this, or you can use some olive oil or some melted butter, and they look really, really shiny and greasy to begin with, but that will all soak in, and it just helps the crust stay soft. So this was later at night. Ideally, you would have these ready on the same day that you would want them. You can do the final proof for these in the fridge and leave them in there for up to, 12, 18, 24 hours, and then bake them straight out of the fridge if you want to have them fresh for a meal. So these are mine the next day, and you can see they are a lot more firm than they would have been super fresh, but it was the only option I had. I couldn't sort of stay up to film the cutting of these. I didn't want to have a late night. So I left these till the next morning. And, 100% whole grain sourdough dinner roll is going to be a little bit more kind of firm and dense than a yeast risen one, or one that's made with refined flours, but they're still delicious. They're really, really tasty, and I hope you give them a try. Thanks for watching, everyone. I appreciate all of your support and encouragement. Please feel free to share this with other people if you think they might be interested, and check out all of my other recipes if you're looking for other whole grain sourdough inspiration. Thanks, everyone. Bye.